Honorable Senators, when the business of this Senate was suspended for lunch, we were at second reading of bills. Are there any further second reading of bills?
Thank
The
you.
chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pindo.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I rise to move for the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act. Mr. Vice President, with the concurrence of the opposition, we would like to debate in one debate the compendium of bills before us, and then we'll move for the second reading individually at the end of the debate. I do also want to foreshadow to members of the Senate that the Juries Amendment Bill 2022 was amended in the House of Assembly with a minor amendment, and that amendment would be found with respect to amendment of Section 8, dealing with where the jury list would be posted. And we have added that in addition to it being on the website of the judiciary, that we would publish that website link in the papers as well, because there was, there was concern that not everybody, would have the free access to the internet, but would be looking at the papers. And so that was a minor amendment in the House of Assembly. We will be substituting that amendment for that bill for the current bill. Also, for the benefit of the Senate, there was also a fourth bill in this compendium called the Magistrates Amendment Bill 2022. That bill remains in committee in the House of Assembly. However, it is intended to be part of this compendium. I'm going to debate it and give my contribution on that bill with this compendium, with the anticipation it's going to be released out of committee shortly. So in the compendium of judicial bills that we will pass today, that includes the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022, the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022, and the Juries Amendment Bill 2022. And as I said, we anticipate the Magistrates Amendment Bill 2022 coming from the House of Assembly in short order. Mr. Vice President, the need for the amendments to the statutes in these compendiums of bills is twofold.
Senator Pindo?
Yes, sir.
Would you move for the bill?
I am moving for the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act as the primary bill we'll be debating in this debate, with an understanding that we are debating the compendium of bills before us, with the recognition that the Magistrates Amendment Bill remains in committee in the House of Assembly. However, in the interest of the context of the compendium of bills, I will be making reference, and I think other senators will be making reference in their debate to that amendment as well. And I think that we are all on the same page, understanding that that will be passed in the Senate once it gets released from committee in the House of Assembly. As I said, the need for the amendments to the statutes in this compendium of bills is twofold. Namely, to update and modernize the law and to refine the law, all in an effort to accord with the changing requirements of our people and to advance the efficient and the effective administration of justice. It is the effective administration of justice that is paramount, and we should all be committed to systematically adjusting the legislation and the procedures on an ongoing basis to ensure that the administration of the courts, justice, and the method in which the OAG, the DPP, the Public Defender's Office, and all members of the executive with respect to the administration of justice likewise modernizes their performance and the framework in which they perform, in order to operate with assurances of the greatest efficiencies while not prejudicing the context of due process. As mentioned in the Magistrates Amendment Bill, this bill will seek to raise the financial thresholds of the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court to hear certain matters. We are increasing those jurisdictional thresholds. For example, $5,000 to $5,000 for small claims, $10,000 in respect to recovery of money, $10,000 in respect to land disputes, $2,000 in respect to seizures, $20,000 in respect to the chief magistrate and stipendary circuit magistrates in civil proceedings, which is the key figure. Usually in magistrate court, commercial matters and civil matters, it's the civil proceedings. We have increased this from $5,000 to $20,000. And there are still arguments that the $20,000 might be too low, and it might even be higher to be able to give a greater jurisdiction for the magistrate's court. $10,000 in circuit magistrates and civil proceedings, $1,000 in small claims, $10,000 in respect to the removal of a small cause of claim from the Supreme Court to the magistrate court, $100 in respect to appeals in matrimonial and civil matters. We're also increasing, a proposed increase in the amendment, the penalties and fees. Fees payable in civil procedures for compensation to $1,500 in each case. A magistrate may impose a non-compliance penalty of 6 months or $1,500, a per diem penalty of $50, and a value for the person's tools and implements of trade to $1,500. Compensation for loss of the time of parties and witnesses attending proceedings before the magistrate's court and attorney's costs increasing to $1,000, and costs by way of lump sum, which could be awarded $500, and court and officers' fees payable in respect to civil proceedings. The broadening of the jurisdiction, Mr. Vice President, of the Magistrates Court is intended to rebalance cases between the Supreme Court and the Magistrates Court in order to relieve the volume of minor disputes from the calendar of the Supreme Court. As we would know, the Magistrates Court is in many instances the primary court for many civil and criminal matters, and especially in civil matters, operates more of a small claims court. The jurisdictional limits we seek to increase have not been adjusted in many, many years, and the operation of society has certainly outpaced these limits. There was discussion at the time, I think a member for Fox Hill said it could have been 15 or so years ago. I'm sure my colleague, Senator Ellis, will be able to clarify that, but there was debate then that it may have been too low. And now again, I think there's debate now that even these raised limits may be too low. But we look to rebalance the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court to be able to serve its intended purpose, but in the context of today's society, keeping it at a level of acceptability in society while maintaining the purpose of the court. This would in turn free up the calendar of the Supreme Court to hear more serious matters in what should be then a more expedited fashion. We'll get to some of that in a little bit. The Supreme Court of the Bahamas was created by Article 93(1) of the Constitution and is a reincarnation of the court that was first established in 1896. And as I said, the Supreme Court has unlimited jurisdiction in general civil and criminal matters. Mr. Vice President, we also have the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022. The intent behind this amendment, the amendment of the Evidence Act, is to provide for a better framework for remote court hearings to better allow for the administration of justice utilizing modern technology. During COVID, we saw that the transformation of the court matters to a virtual setting, and by all accounts, it operated rather well. Even so, you would speak to the President of the Court of Appeal, which is my dear friend and former colleague, and we all know the father of my dear friend in this place. And he would tell you that he would wish he would never come back and sit in person again, that the system of virtual hearings for him in the Court of Appeal and his panels operates so efficiently and effectively that he believes that there should be just a permanent solution. In the interest of providing a framework for the continued administration of justice, the Evidence Amendment Act proposes to remove all references to live television link and replace it with references to video link to better accommodate the video tools that we utilize now, such as Zoom and WebEx and the like. Repeals and replaces Section 79A to 78C, and repeals and replaces the schedule containing the amended rules applicable to giving of evidence by video link in criminal proceedings. The ability to give evidence by way of video link will be available to children, the elderly, and other vulnerable witnesses, and will now include any other witnesses whose evidence is likely to be diminished because of a fear or distress in having to physically testify in person in a court. A witness who falls under any of these categories, Mr. Vice President, may testify by video link with the court's permission or on the court's own motion. In the current act, only witnesses who are outside the Bahamas or were on an island in the Bahamas other than the island in which the proceedings were being held were able to give evidence by television link. With this amendment, witnesses may give evidence by video link whether within or outside of the Bahamas. The bill also seeks to amend the circumstances in which an accused person may testify by video link, by making it possible for him to so testify if he conducts himself in such a way as to render the continuation of the proceedings in a physical space of a court impractical, rather than where the continuation of the proceedings in court is impossible, as in the provisions to be repealed. The amendment accords with the provisions of Article 22. The overarching goal of these amendments are to provide the opportunity for evidence by way of video link when the circumstances make it difficult for in-person testimony, and thus the intent is to remove the impediment to the delay in the administration of justice, especially in circumstances where you have difficult cases, difficult witnesses, or difficult accused persons who are frustrating the process and frustrating the administration of justice by their conduct and actions. We should not allow that to happen, and we are not allowing that to happen. We're providing an applicable framework in order to be able to expedite the efficient administration of these matters. Mr. Vice President, the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022, this is a companion to the Evidence Amendment Bill. It repeals, again, references to television link in the Principal Act and replaces them with references to video link. It also sets out that the right of a person accused of a criminal offense to defend himself in person or by a legal representative may be exercised in a trial by way of video link. It further provides that an accused person can only be tried by video link with his own consent or by the court's direction where he has so conducted himself as to render the continuance of the trial in court impracticable. And further, where in the interest of the opinion, or in the opinion of the court, the interest of justice so requires this. This is an important distinction, especially with respect to the consent of the accused. Obtaining the consent of the accused is vital, as there are scholars and arguments who would say by applying it without requiring the consent of the accused may present certain constitutional challenges on right to face your accuser and otherwise. So we took the position that, we want to be able to provide the framework for video link to expedite these matters, understanding we do have a mitigation effect of having to, if it's for the accused, having the accused having to have the consent. Now, we're going to have to do other things to encourage the accused to consent. Because, generally an accused may want to draw out his trial, especially if he's readily available for bail. So what we would need to do in a few instances to make this amendment really applicable in the modern era and getting the consent of the accused is either provide by way of ensuring matters are heard quickly and therefore bail may not be awarded so readily in the first instance, and I will get to that a little bit later. Or you may even provide, as I'd love to hear my colleague, Senator Ellis' opinion on this, but you may even be able to provide certain sentencing guidelines that may be lesser if the accused consents to a video link trial rather than in-person trial. These are just options to discuss. We have scholarly people around. We are open to suggestions on that, but I think it's fair to say that we would want to incentivize an accused to elect to have his matter heard by video link in order to try to expedite the backlog in the cases that are before the courts. That is the ultimate goal of all of this, is to create the more effective and efficient administration of justice. Mr. Vice President, the Juries Amendment Bill 2022. This bill proposes to remove the requirement to publish the approved list of jurors in the daily newspaper. It substitutes the judiciary's website for the government's website as a place for publication of the approved list. The bill further seeks to provide that the approved list must contain the full name of each prospective juror and his date of birth. It also provides for persons aggrieved by the inclusion of their names on the approved list to apply to the registrar for exemption from or disqualification for jury service. Mr. Vice President, the reason for this amendment is twofold. Firstly, the associated costs with publication of lists in the newspaper is rather costly and onerous, and frankly, rather historic, especially given the modern technology we have. And if we're going to advance hearings and trials by video link, we certainly want to be consistent in everything we do to advance the administration of justice. And publishing persons' lists of names of jurors in the paper, it just seems rather foolish and impractical and a waste of money and resources. Secondly, we believe that this method of publishing jury lists that we're choosing is a move to better protect the identity and addresses of potential jurors. Now, we know it's not a perfect solution because you still have a name and a birth date published, but you no longer have the address of the person. And to be honest, we did contemplate and we did discuss about even removing the birth dates. But you have so many people with the same name in our society that it wouldn't have been practical, and we thought it might create more problems than what the problems we're trying to solve. And so again, it's not a perfect scenario, but it is a much better scenario than we have today. And again, as I said in the introduction, in order to preserve and affect the continual effective administration of justice, we have to be committed to continual modifications and amendments and tweaks to legislation and procedure to get it right. We are operating in a framework today that is rather aged, and we have to keep pace with the administration of justice, with the administration of society. And this is what we're trying to do, and we do have that commitment to keep this up to date and evolving. So if other ideas come to better protect the jurists' identities, we're open to those suggestions. We think that it's a very important thing, especially in the context of crime in the country. You don't want to expose people unnecessarily. The above bills have been shared with the Chief Justice, and he fully supports these amendments. In fact, he has stated these bills introduce transformative reforms, that the package of legislation would represent the single largest legislative intervention by a government in the Bahamas in the administration of justice in decades. The draft bills were also circulated to the Bar Association and their membership and the wider bar. As mentioned, we have committed to the effective administration of justice on an ongoing basis, and these, we believe, are legislative steps in the right direction. Mr. Vice President, as indicated earlier, there are other reforms that can be made outside of the legislative approach that has an impact on the administration of justice. For the benefit of transparency and updating Bahamians, I would like to highlight some initiatives that I have currently underway that are geared to assist with the efficient administration of justice and trials and matters in the judiciary. The Office of the Attorney General and its related institutions, such as the DPP and the Public Defender, also have to have a commitment to work more efficiently within the courts in order to ensure that justice is administered effectively and efficiently. If you would think about it, the Office of the Attorney General is the largest law firm in the country. We handle more matters on a day-to-day basis than maybe all the law firms combined. We also have the Department of Public Prosecutions, that's the prosecution arm of the enforcement of the laws. And we run a public defender office that provides defense counsel for those who could not afford to hire somebody to represent themselves. So we have an enormous commitment or obligation and commitment to ensure what we do also helps with the administration of justice. We are not immune to the impact on the inefficiencies of the system. To that end, I'm pleased to announce that we have approval to acquire and put in place an integrated case management system that will be able to monitor and electronically case manage all of the civil and criminal actions which we are a part in all arms of the administration of justice, OAG, DPP, and the public defender. This will create significant efficiencies in how we administer case matters compared to the current paper file case management that we manage internally. I'll give you an example, right? And this is, I was shocked that I met this, right? Shocked. You go in there, right? Attorney General, you're the big shot lawyer in town, right? And somebody calls you, hey, Ryan, you're my friend. Can you check on my case for me? I said, no problem. I can check on. Let's see where it is. I send a request to the appropriate lawyers. They got to go, dig in the file, pull the file, open the file, read the latest communications and the dockets, come back, prepare a minute to the minister, issue that minute with all of these annexes. Here's the update on your case. When if you had a properly integrated case management system, I would be able to push a button on the computer and have the status of the case, when the next hearing is, what has been filed, what is due to be filed, and when at my fingertip. Imagine the amount of effort and time wasted just in case management when you operate a law firm with 60 plus lawyers and handling more cases than anybody in the country. The inefficiencies are enormous, enormous. Well, I have approval already for an integrated case management system that has been tendered, that the tenders are back, that we have chosen the provider, and we have it in our capital budget for this fiscal year. So I don't even have to burden him next fiscal year for this. No, I don't have to lift no more box. But this is just case management in my office. I'll get to the judiciary, but in our office, right? This new integrated case management system will be able to speak with the system that is being put in by the Chief Justice for the judiciary and allow the seamless electronic interaction of calendars, court documents, and filings, and other communication and coordination between the government's lawyers, whether it be civil or criminal or defense, and the judiciary and the courts. So it will be absolutely an integrated function between the case management system put in by the judiciary and the Chief Justice, and the one being put in by the Office of the Attorney General and the government's lawyers. This was one of the primary needs identified by my litigation team on the very first day of becoming Attorney General. And I am pleased to say we have secured this much-needed case management system within the same year being elected. Mr. Vice President, additionally, to leverage the administration of justice in our family islands, the Chief Justice and myself as the Attorney General and our offices have committed to build out a comprehensive remote court system throughout our country. We have committed to secure the necessary IT equipment and identify the facilities in the family islands to allow for remote hearings and to eliminate the need for magistrates to have to travel from island to island to have circuit courts. And those who have represented the islands or who live in the islands would know, I'm sure my friend Senator Henfield would have gotten many complaints when he was member of Parliament about accrued cases that can never be heard because the magistrate, well, Abaco is different. You have a sitting magistrate. So I can't use you as an example. But for instance, I have gotten a request out of Long Island, right? Long Island claims to have enough matters to have circuit court for 3 or 4 continuous days, right? Exuma as well. This would eliminate that need in that with the amendments we have made to the legislation for virtual hearings and the commitment to have the IT program in partnership with the judiciary and the OAG, the government, to be able to have these remote hearings throughout our family of islands, something that is going to create significant synergies and efficiencies and go a long way to addressing the delays and the backlogs in court matters throughout the country. This is a program we're currently engaged in and hope to be able to roll out the remote court matters in family islands within months, save for any supply chain challenges we may have on the technology equipment. But this is the executive and the judiciary working in synergy and lockstep to create a more efficient and effective administration of justice. At the end of the day, the quicker you can have matters heard and determined, the quicker society moves on, the quicker economy moves on, and the listen, we have to fly these magistrates all over. We are looking. You know, Anudi's here. We are actually working with the Minister for Immigration and the Minister for National Security to put a remote virtual court complex in Inagua to address the matters of illegal immigration and migrants and to avoid the necessity of having to have the migrants come to Nassau to just be heard in front of a magistrate, or when we have large amounts of migrants in Inagua, we would have to set up courts on premises, fly magistrates down, fly clerks down, set the physical court up, and administer the court in the yard at the Defense Force base.
You bring in so much money today, Ron.
But if you can once we put in this virtual court in Inagua, we would be able to have remote matters with respect to illegal migration, which would eliminate a lot of cost, expense, and time in the administration of that type of justice. Furthermore, we're working with the Minister of Immigration to put a remote court in the detention center. Because we have a lot of challenges in that you have certain prescribed time periods to have people in front of the magistrates, and due to difficulties that I don't necessarily want to expand on here, it is almost impossible to properly administer that. And then the country is liable for all kinds of habeas corpus matters and liabilities and expenses and judgments related to that. If we could administer those matters through a virtual court at the detention center, that cost issue will be eliminated for the government as well, providing that much more financial stability for my friend to my left here to manage the affairs of the country. You got to love me, my friend, man. I'm just the Attorney General. Although we agree, Mr. Vice President, that these are all positive legislative initiatives and policy initiatives today, I think it important to emphasize that the advancement of the efficient and the effective administration of justice cannot fully be accomplished by the executive or the legislature, although we will try to do everything we can to do so. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Vice President, that the judiciary and the private attorney practitioners also need to take some responsibility. A recent study and trend analysis has demonstrated that the average duration, this is the average duration of proceedings in the Bahamas, is approximately 211 days for one proceeding. 211 days from the beginning to the end. Of this, it takes an average of 96 days for preparations for the proceedings, to prepare. 35 days for the hearing, on average, 35 days. How much evidence you need to give in a matter? And 80 days to receive the judgment. That's the 211 days, right? These timelines must be reduced to advance the effective administration of justice. Mr. Vice President, private practitioners have a responsibility to advance their matters in a proper and expeditious manner. Feedback received would suggest that certain private practitioners draw out court matters unnecessarily. And I think the time frames for concluding hearings is evidence of just that. An average of 35 days just in the hearing, 96 days to prepare. A 96-day average seems rather unreasonable as an average. I understand there are complex cases, but there are also simple cases. This is an average. So imagine the outside realm of preparation, if 96 is the average. Matters should be prepared and readied for trial much quicker. And I ask the bar and the private practitioners to take some responsibility in this regard. You have an obligation in this as well. Mr. Vice President, as indicated, The average days for a hearing is 35 days. The Prime Minister only just this week spoke to me about this and how when he was an earlier practitioner, he would do a trial in 2 to 3 days, a murder trial. When the same matter these days are taking weeks and weeks to do. This is a function of both the private practitioners drawing these matters out, but also we need the judiciary to take control of their courts and advance a disciplined and efficient trial or hearing. The judiciary needs to take control and tell the practitioners, you're going down the wrong path. You don't need 25 witnesses to prove this case. The judges and judiciary have to take control of their courts as well. We also take note that the average amount of days to receive a judgment after the hearing is 80 days. After the hearing, it's another 80 days to receive the judgment on average. This is far too long to wait for a judgment. It creates frustration, inefficiencies, and has adverse impacts on the economic and commercial development of our country. During the opening of the legal year, I would have stated that one area that would facilitate the perceived and actual efficiency of the administration of justice would be a renewed focus on the delivery of judgments in a timely fashion. And I reiterate this position. There's a legal maxim that says justice delayed is justice denied. This means that cases should be heard without unnecessary delay, as to do otherwise would lead to great injustice. 80 days is an average. So there are many cases that wait on judgments far more than 80 days. This is a key component of the judiciary's commitment to effective and efficient administration of justice. We are all in this together in the legal realm, all of us. The legislature, the executive, the private practitioners, the government practitioners, and the judiciary. No one party in that can do it by themselves, Mr. Vice President. No one constituent of that group can say, I'm committed to it, and the other not be committed to it. You need a collective buy-in in the administration of justice and the administration of our courts. And that's all I'm pleading for. We're trying to do our part. We're passing laws and amendments. We're putting in case management systems. We're putting in virtual courts, and we're trying to modernize the administration. But we need everybody to come along with us. We need everybody. And I'm happy that we have somebody around this table that sits on the Bar Council. Because I know she's going to go back to her membership and make the representation she heard today. I know she's going to do that. She's a good person. Wholeheartedly. She's probably on the phone right now. So I want to say, let's walk in unity. Let's walk in lockstep. Because I am sure that we will hear from the other side today, not necessarily discussion about the judiciary and the advancement of this legislation, but we may hear about matters related to crime. Well, we can't address those matters unless we all walk in unison to address the administration of justice. And that is fundamental. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present these bills in a compendium. I want to thank the opposition to allowing us to do so. And I thank you for your indulgence. And I hereby move for the second reading of what I call the Compendium of Bills. But in this instance, I move for the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act. Thank you very much.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Vice President, I rise to second the motion that the Evidence Amendment Bill be read a second time, and which deals with this along with the Juries Amendment Bill and the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill deals with the drive or the the move to have more efficient administration of justice. And with the juries bill, as mentioned by the AG in his motion, where we move the process of the publication of the list into the modern age, so to speak, by putting it into the digital space, and further modernizing the law as it relates to evidence. And the Attorney General, in moving the bills, laid out a very, very compelling case about all of the issues that militate against the effective administration of justice. Crime, and in particular violent crime, Mr. Vice President, continues to be a threat to public order, good public order. And basically, it fuels a sense of, it affects the sense of well-being and safety of the public, how the public feels about their safety. So, as the AG said, these are steps in the effective administration of justice. But to put a dent in violent crime, I believe, Mr. Vice President, that criminals must know and understand that they will be quickly caught, they will be quickly tried, and if convicted, they will be quickly punished. And any delays, inefficiencies, dysfunction in our system results in justice being delayed and indeed justice being denied. And again, in moving the bill, the Honorable Attorney General, I think everyone was shocked when he disclosed that it takes 211 days for a matter to be disposed of, and then he broke it down into the different segments, including 80 days on average from the conclusion of a matter to a judgment, which leads to frustration, leads to the feeling that there is not justice, leads to the feeling that something is working against me. It leads to distrust, and in some cases it ultimately leads, unfortunately, to vigilantism and street justice, so to speak. And so to the extent that we can improve the functioning of the system and thereby increase the faith that the public has in the system, I think these are important steps that we are doing today. It's also important, Mr. Vice President, for us to continue to review our systems and our processes, as we're doing today, and to be able to look at the various stages that make up that 211 days, and how can we, within that 211 days, where we can move to immediately begin to cut that down and to, again, to deliver justice more efficiently. So we need to continually review our systems and our processes as far as the courts are concerned, as far as the police and law enforcement are concerned. And we in the executive, or those of us who serve in the executive, must ensure that at all levels, all branches, they have the proper tools and resources to be able to do their jobs. That's an important step. Another very, very important step when we talk about dealing with crime and criminal activity, Mr. Vice President, is ensuring that we have proper prevention programs in place, proper alternatives at the community level, so that when deviant behavior can be detected at an early stage, and individuals can be put in diversion programs where they can receive counseling or intervention or whatever it is to prevent the movement into more serious crime and dysfunction. We must focus, Mr. Vice President, in improving economic conditions, living conditions, ensure that jobs and opportunities are created. We travel certain places within our country, we see the condition within which people exist. It shouldn't happen in a modern Bahamas, and it acts as an incubator for dysfunction and deviant behavior. So we must address that. I was happy to hear, to see announced publicly that the Urban Renewal Department will be resuming its small home repair program. It's a small intervention individually Mr. Vice President, but exactly, as it contributes to improving conditions, alleviating cramped conditions and squalor conditions within which people live in our country, I think that goes towards removing or ameliorating that condition, that breeding ground that leads to dysfunction that really shouldn't be in our Bahamas in this modern age. And so the Attorney General covered it with tremendous, as they say in the legal profession, aplomb. And there's nothing much more that I can add other than to say these are small steps that are targeted at improving the administration. The AG laid out other programs that are in train to do the same, because to the extent that we can have efficient administration of justice, people have faith in the system, they believe that the justice system works for all, then I believe that, along with other initiatives, would lead to a reduction in some of the behavior that affects us. And so I second the second reading of the Evidence Amendment Bill, Mr. Vice President, and at the appropriate time, I will move for second reading of the other two bills in the compendium. Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michaela Ellis.
Sorry, my mic was off. Start over.
No, tell us start of the public.
No problem. Mr. Vice President. Sorry, Mr. Vice President, May the 4th, which sounds like the popular phrase, May the Force, is known as Star Wars Day. The Star Wars story has 11 movies and several animated series. It is the ultimate story of good and evil. So it seems almost kismet that we are also debating a compendium of legislation aimed at improving the administration of justice this afternoon. I am pleased to hear of the pending developments to the administration of justice. I was holding out hope that I could be a circuit magistrate for Acklands, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I note the Attorney General's comments about private practitioners and their contribution to the delays in the court system. My first comment, Mr. Vice President, is that none of the legislation tabled today or that we're dealing with today will aid with changing the 211-day timeline or period. Cases cannot be rushed. In fact, they are statutory timelines which give to that 211 days. Evidence must be analyzed, documents must be prepared, and is far more detrimental to the practice of law if attorneys were to be negligent and rush their matters. It increases the risk of errors. But he's correct. The administration of justice is our collective responsibility. I'm going to deal with the legislation in this compendium in three parts. First, the amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code and the Evidence Act. They give the court the authority to take evidence in certain circumstances and upon application via video link. And additionally, they provide that the accused can for the first time participate in court proceedings by video link if it's in the interest of justice for them to do so. When we resumed court hearings after the initial lockdown, there was considerable discussion about how criminal matters would be conducted. Civil matters, having already had the legislative framework in place, were easily able to pivot to virtual or remote hearings. We are still doing matters remotely. I have in fact done several civil trials via Zoom. The criminal side, unfortunately, hasn't been so lucky, and they have not been able to pivot in the same way because the framework was not in place. One of the benefits, and some would say the only benefit, of the COVID virus is that it has forced the Bahamas and the world to embrace technology. New businesses have developed, the way we work has changed, the way we spend money has changed. It has become a small world after all. Because meetings and conferences are no longer limited to the persons that are fortunate enough to attend in person. These amendments, which extend the provision for video links in criminal matters, are beneficial to the administration of justice, and I support those amendments. The second is the amendment to the Juries Act. It removes the requirement and the expense of publishing the jury list in the newspaper, and it removes the inclusion of a person's home address from the list. I support these amendments to the Juries Act, but they do not deal with the real issues surrounding juries in the Bahamas. Mr. Vice President, as an attorney, I'm sure you've experienced it yourself. The jury's list gets published, and then you get calls from close friends and not so close acquaintances asking how can they get out of jury duty. My response to this inquiry, when I get it, is always, you can't complain about crime or complain about the justice system if you are unwilling to do your civic duty and serve on a jury. Secretly, not so secretly now, I'm grateful that I am an attorney and that I'm not eligible for jury duty. We need to look at why people don't want to serve on juries and bring legislation where appropriate to fix the deficiencies. Of course, all of the issues cannot be fixed by direct legislation. Many of the issues can be resolved by giving the judiciary the autonomy to properly manage its resources. Our constitutional obligation is to create laws for the good governance of the Bahamas, which also includes the administration of justice. This leads me to the amendments to the Magistrates Act. The Magistrates Act is being substantially amended to increase the jurisdiction of the Magistrates Court. Most persons who come into contact with the judicial system in the Bahamas come into contact with the Magistrates Court. For criminal matters, it is the first point of contact. For most contract, rent, damage disputes, the Magistrates Court is the appropriate jurisdiction. The Magistrates Court is meant to be layperson friendly, so that persons can have access to the justice system with or without a lawyer. But unfortunately, the Magistrates Court leaves much to be desired for attorneys and laypersons. Applicants and respondents and virtual complainants and the accused are forced to wait in the same waiting area near the entrance to the courtroom. With little supervision of the area, it's an environment primed for intimidation and interference. Parties often have long wait times for their matters to be heard, and the matters are often adjourned due to circumstances outside of anyone's control. We are passing legislation to expand the work of the Magistrates Court, but we're not addressing the issues which impede the work of the court at existing levels. The Magistrates Court suffers from a lack of resources. The draft court services bill would give the judiciary, the co-equal third branch of government, the autonomy that it requires so that it can have access to resources and have the power to administer and control its resources. At my first sitting in this honorable place, The resolution to create a committee for the management of the House of Assembly was debated. Colleagues on both sides of this ancient table expressed the importance of the legislature as a co-equal branch of government, being treated with the appropriate amount of dignity, which includes the ability to manage its own resources and govern its own policies. These arguments also apply equally to the judiciary. Multiple administrations have left the Court Services Bill in the file cabinet of the Law Reform Commission. It's probably the same cabinet with the amendment to the Sexual Offense Act and Gender Violence Bill. I'm not one for metaphors, but growing a tree before ensuring the health of its roots and branches is counterproductive. This thing goes with sense. Mr. Vice President, the continued development of the processes of the administration of justice is paramount to the development and maintenance of an efficient and fair judicial system. This work is continuous, without glitz and glamour. The dedicated staff of the Office of the Judiciary throughout the Bahamas work tirelessly to assist countless Bahamians and residents that come to the court for relief. They provide services for people who are frustrated and discouraged. Having come to the court for relief is never the high point of someone's life. The judiciary staff dutifully carry out their assignments, often giving invaluable advice from their many years of experience. I wish to publicly thank them for all of the assistance and guidance that they have given me during my almost 15 years of practice. Mr. Vice President, I end my contributions today as I have ended almost every contribution thus far. It is a continued pleasure to contribute in this place, and I'm humbled by the opportunity to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of our beautiful Bahama land. May God continue to bless our sunny clime, and may the force be with you.
As many
No.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm honored to contribute to this compendium of bills that seeks to improve the function of our judiciary. And right out of the gate, let me say that we support every action taken by the government to make justice more readily available in the Bahamas, in our country where justice seems sometimes so hard to come by. I want to take off from where my colleague Senator Barnard Ellis left, asserting I thought she could have done so more forcibly, but I suppose she didn't want to appear to be self-serving. For reasons we leave unsaid here, for asserting the independence of the judiciary. I looked at that point earlier, and I recalled when we did the Constitutional Reform Commission, and we went across the country, and I found a point on page of that report. It was in 2013. The commission was commissioned by Prime Minister Christie. On page 27 of the report, it says this, and I quote, "Executive powers concentrated in the hands of the Prime Minister and Cabinet," I added in, "and Cabinet, has to be curtailed. Some of the powers of appointment of the Prime Minister relating to public officers, and this is the point I wanted to get to, the judiciary, might be transferred to the Governor General or to some other permanent commission whose independence, security of tenure are already constitutionally secured. And I think the point asserted by Senator Ellis was that the same independence the Constitution provides for the Cabinet of the Bahamas, for the Parliament of the Bahamas, the legislature, ought to be made available to the judiciary of the Bahamas. And we're going to have to grow. I understand the process of maturation. We're relatively speaking, we are still a young country. But this is the direction in which we would like to go as a developing country. I also want to commend at the outset those officers who toil in the justice system. The Chief Justice, the Honorable Brian Murray, Sir Brian Murray, I beg your pardon, who has done a yeoman's work in the short period of time that he has been there to advance the judiciary to the point now where we're discussing here the possibility of not having those big buses traversing the streets of New Providence. If we can get, I had an issue. Let me just finish that thought. If we can get those who are accused to agree, I don't know. That's going to be sticky. It's going to be quite a way for you to handle that. I don't know if you're going to have to amend the act which deals with how you plea bargain with people who are accused. I don't know. But it's worth the effort. The constitutional point that we had with that I had with it initially, was that every person accused has a right to face his accuser. Of course, there's case law to support the point that if you're in court and you're conducting yourself unruly, the judge can have you put out of the court and continue the case. But I got some appeasement from the notion that they're going to have to make applications, and those applications will be looked upon. For the application has to be approved by them for it, because there was a case that I recall from school, the gun court case in Jamaica, where the Privy Council made a big issue over the appearance of the accused. All in every effort to improve the judiciary. I also want to encourage those people who work around the courts. They get a lot of grief. The police and the people who work in the courts, they get a lot of grief because there's always, you need someone to blame, someone that you can physically put a hand on and blame, not physically, but blame when things don't go in the way that you think they ought to. I commended this effort to engage the judicious use of technology to advance justice in our country. I think it's a great idea. Is a similar thing that we looked at doing, and we should continue to look at as relates to the healthcare sector, where you don't need to fly into New Providence to see a surgeon. Telemedicine, right? It's not, telemedicine. It's the same kind of a system that we're looking at here. I believe we can draw analogies from there. We must also seek to improve. I thought Senator Ellis would speak to this a little bit more. I'm not sure whether or not she did. We must also seek to improve the physical plan of the judicial system, the courts, the jury rooms, and there are, people who work in more palatable environments. I'm sure you can find studies that support the notion that they will be more productive. I'm sure of it. I didn't have time to look at it because I just sketched out a few notes here, not wanting to take up too much unnecessary time. And in the same vein, when we discuss the 211 days that it takes for a judgment to come to its fruition, we must also look at the idea that judges in this country, most of them, I don't know if it's changed since I've been around them much, they don't have judicial clerks, properly trained judicial clerks who help them with the research Yeah, I mean, we get tons of young lawyers coming out of school every year. And judicial clerks are very helpful in helping judges to put together their matters. Of course, you're going to want the brightest and the best to be working with judges in that regard. We also want to look at how we staff the system, right? There must be trained, qualified staff in the system if we want the system to produce at its optimum. And so recurrent training, ongoing courses should be encouraged for individuals who work, the clerks and whomever else who work in the system. I don't believe we had, I stand to be corrected, but when I was doing research for this, I don't believe we had any real serious upgrade to the fiscal plan of the judiciary since, I think it was Prime Minister Ingram who tried to do some things, and they built a complex in Grand Bahama and with the Review Commission, Anspacher House, and improved the level of judges on the court, established the Permanent Court of Appeal, I believe, if I'm recalling, and so we have to really look at how we press the system to produce, and leaving it in that archaic state that it's in. We can't get that blood out of the proverbial stone. As we move on to of course, you can't come here and discuss the improvement of the judiciary without touching on the high levels of crime and the fear of crime in our country. I want to commend the police force for working extremely hard under very, very difficult circumstances and conditions. I, of course, served in the military, and I know they're called upon. I have a son who's a police officer. I don't know why he didn't join the defense force, but he's the last one. He probably, and he loves policing. So I see the extraordinary hours that they're called upon to work, and sometimes people forget that they're human beings as well when they deal with these things every day, day in and day out. And I hope they are looking at counseling for a lot of their officers, because you see a lot of stuff as we did. Sometimes you'd come across migrant vessels that are capsized with people in them, and that's a difficult thing to deal with. You have to conduct mass burials, and these officers and even the Bahamian community nowadays are put upon to see very gruesome images. And mental health is a serious thing, right? And so we have to look at all of these things holistically. I have to comment on a point that we made earlier while seated, that a person who is charged, convicted, in jail to serve 18 years, and I think there was a story in one of the papers, my former colleague, the former Minister of National Security, commented on it. How does a person like that meet the criteria to be on a work release program? I find that difficult to reconcile. I don't know, there may be some exceptional circumstance that we're not aware of, but some answers need to be given about that, because we appreciate we live in this country where as soon as somebody comes out on bail, more often than not, there is tremendous violence, right? And you want innocent people to get caught up in these things. I said to my wife when I listened to it, I said, you could be at a gas station and a fellow there working, and you don't know his history, but we don't want to discourage I think he was at Arubis. We don't want to discourage them from hiring people, because we believe everybody needs a second chance. But we have to be more careful and particular in the way that we're vetting people who, because when I think about a work release scheme, I think about someone who is obviously on the right path, has been watched for a number of years whilst in the prison, and exhibiting a certain level of commitment to change. And then thinking about re-entering society to participate with us as they rightly ought to be able to after serving their time. You know, the insidious nature of the levels and types of crime that we are experiencing and encountering in the Bahamas is counterproductive to our national development. And we're all loath to blame any administration for crime because this is a problem that has transcended administrations. But when you're in the chair, people look to you for answers. And that's just the nature of the whole thing, you know. And it led me back to a thesis that I did in 2015. And I looked at the abstract from the thesis, it reminded me. And it's called Making the National Security Council Better in the Bahamas to Resolve Illegal Immigration. That's the title of the thesis. And in it, I begin by saying the Bahamas' economy depends primarily on tourism. Unchecked crime and cross-border threats jeopardize the country's economic viability. Huh? It's online. I'm thinking that I need to perhaps look at making it into some kind of a book, right? Do some more research and studies on it. The Bahamian government must find a solution for safeguarding the country's relatively high standard of living. And these fellas running around the streets, carrying on like they don't come from nowhere, right? They do so. And I looked at the acting commissioner of police, indicating, you know, you're threatening our way of life, you're threatening our livelihood. You know, when you continue to conduct yourself in this fashion. And so I think we have to make efforts to involve all of our civic groups, the churches, and Minister for Economic Affairs. You're going to find money to give them. Because it's difficult enough for them to do what they're called upon to do without the necessary funding to help them to do it. In your blueprint, I always talk about this. You, in the speech from the throne, you talk about youth development and youth groups and how we can engage. We gotta take some of these young people out of these gangs and put them in proper gangs. I always said that if you want to be in a gang, join one of the uniform branches where we have legitimacy to carry arms and to conduct ourselves under the law. You know, you don't need to be in a gang like that. You can come and join a proper gang where when you lay your head down at night, you can sleep, not looking over your shoulder, not worrying about your mama being roused by some hoodlum or some fellow who just coming in to kill, steal, and to destroy like the devil. You know, you can become a part of a proper gang where we love you just as much or even more. And so I don't need a PhD in psychology to recognize that we are raising children that are devoid of reasoning, and good judgment, and compassion and empathy. I don't know if it's because we watch so much TV and violent movies nowadays. You know, I'm no psychologist. I don't know what it is, but when I see people sending around videos of someone's child in the road disfigured because of small arm fire, and you know, people don't like to hear us say this, but we don't make guns in the Bahamas. They coming from somewhere, and I'm sure the foreign minister, as I have done, and as foreign ministers have done before me, has lamented this notion, as my colleagues have in the region, lamented this notion to those countries that produce these weapons. And we must still find a way. We must find a way. We must find a way of mitigating the entrance of these weapons into our country. You know, before I lose this trend of thought, I believe we spoke to the juries and why we have to take these steps to. And you probably want to be more diplomatic and not say it this way to even protect the juries, because we live in a very small society, a very small country where everybody knows someone, and invariably people will interfere with jurors if they have a mind to do so. And so the thought I had come to me when I heard you say something like that, or Senator Ellis, was that we must strengthen the law so that we can deal very, very deliberately with anyone who seeks to tamper with a juror in an effort to interfere with justice, the delivery of justice. We can't tolerate that. We ought not tolerate that in our country. I'm about to take my seat because I didn't want to belabor this notion too long. But we must also look at how we deal with people, with offenders, right? There has to be a real effort toward rehabilitation in the prison system. There has to be. And those who can perhaps find themselves in BTVI or a BTVI program. I remember we used to have a chief in the Defense Force who used to go into the prison and teach them how to be mechanics and engineers. These kind of programs, I think, are useful, where a prisoner who is serious about it, could learn how to be a plumber. We need plumbers. We need good mechanics, and we need good engineers and carpenters. I'm of the view that a person who goes to jail ought not just be sitting there, waiting to I don't know that this is the case, but waiting for 3 square meals a day. I know it's a rough time up there, because I know we have one of the worst institutions, the physical plan in the world, and I see the government is seeking to improve that, which is very good. But there's this notion of restorative justice. You know, you take a father from a family, or you take a son from a single mother, and you just go to jail and wait for your time to come out, because, you know, the Privy Council has given us this creature called the worst of the worst, and we don't know when we can ever exercise the ultimate penalty again in this country, if we can. And many of us are proponents of it. I'm a proponent of it. I mean, you know, the Bible says sometimes the argument is that you might, you know, deal with one that is innocent. Well, the Bible says that sometimes the innocent will suffer with the guilty. I have done so many times, suffered with the guilty. That's the word, eh? And so we must look at this issue or notion of restorative justice, where you do some, and in Canada, I think it's thriving. I know they were trying to do it in some parts of the region. I don't know how far we've gotten with that notion. But you should be made to support a family that you took the breadwinner from. You know, you just a single mother with a son who's working. You know, and if he's caught up in things and you end up in the line of fire like you in the war, well, so be it. But there are some cases, I'm sure, that we can look at where they work every week, they get a pay, and some of that pay go. This is just the rudimentary aspect of restorative justice. You know, some of that pay go to their family who you deprived of the breadwinner. Huh? Yeah. Some of the pay go to help buy groceries to that family. You don't take the breadwinner from that family. And so these kind of initiatives, I think we ought to be looking at as we look at the improvement of justice. But there is that side of justice that we don't talk about much. I've heard stories like you're in the food store, and the fellow who's accused of killing your loved one is in the food store alongside you wearing the ankle bracelet like a badge of honor. You know, that must be a very traumatic experience. You kill my loved one and you're out with your ankle bracelet, and that's you're wearing a pair of shorts or whatever, like a badge of honor. You know, what have we come to, right? That's not the Bahamas I grew up in. And you will always hear me talk about the island, because I believe the island upbringing is the best in the world. All right, you'll always hear me say that. Anybody could chastise you on the island, man. You out in the wrong company, or you out carrying on in a way that you know you ought not to be. Well, we can't even do that now in our own families, in some of these places, right? Well, my nieces and nephews know. Well, but once you see Uncle Darren look at you a certain way, you appreciate, you understand that what you're doing needs to stop. It'd be naive of us to believe and accept that those who continue to wreak havoc in our communities are random thugs moving about without purpose and focus. This existence, and I know of it. You know, we all should know about it. There's this existence of transnational and cross-border crimes. There's this thing that we have from these big countries who deport what they call criminal deportees. And where I formerly sat as the foreign minister, I had to sign for some people to come home, and my first question would be, what is this connection to the Bahamas? Yeah, you can tell me you left the Bahamas with your parents when you were 5. You have no uncle, no aunt, no one living here. You have no documentation to show me where you come from. Did you just say to them, send me to the Bahamas because that's a nice place to go? So I say, no, well, until you're able to show us a connection, a positive connection to this country. And I'm continuing to search. There are some writings on it about the impact of criminal deportees in these small developing communities. There's some writing on it. They don't just leave where they come from. And here is how I look at them. They are trained at a university PhD level in criminality. There you have the FBI. You have all of these other advanced agencies, right? That they manage to elude. And then you bring them here and put them on our little police force. That's a very difficult concept. It's a very, very difficult concept. And so there might be cause also to look at how we cause these people to be re-entered into our society. I mean, we didn't raise them. They name us as the state for them to come to. And so we are forced to take in convicted criminals from these developed countries who no doubt come with their connections intact. And we wonder where the gun's coming from. You know, they don't just leave all their friends behind when they come. Technology has it so that they can get on a WhatsApp or some other means and they can have real conversations. They don't have to go to the phone booth like we used to have to before. Some of these young people don't know anything about that. We had to go and put in our dime or our 10 cents or quarter and use the phone, you know? They don't have that. They have connections, real connections that we have to look into, you know, when we're taking them back. And I think if we're not doing it, we need to be looking a little bit more deeply at some of those connections, because when they come home to us, they bring with them those connections, and we're continuing to fight this uphill battle. So while we must do all within our powers to strengthen and empower the police to fight against the criminal element, we must also enlist in a far more deliberate way civil society, inclusive of our churches and community, our groups, to help in this war. Before I take my seat, let me state that the police cannot and will not be all things to all people. I'm certain that we are all aware of these viral videos that come out of these big melees and fights after, you know, at these events. And I don't know if they do it. I don't know if they do it now. I know there's some form of it in for the Ministry of Health to approve your event. But these people who are having these events, they need to take more responsibilities for these events, right? They ought to be made to produce for the police or some other authority a plan to mitigate melees, fights, and disturbances. They ought to be made to produce a plan for that. And that plan should be approved by some authority, preferably the police, before you give an authorization to have this event. You know, you can't be, you know, they're not sued. They're not sued because if I come to your event, I should have an expectation that I'm going to be in a safe space. But I mean, barring anything, you know, unforeseen, some of these people go to these places to cause ruckus and to cause problem. And we're not, you know, we're not, how did we become this type of society? Where you cannot go and have a social event and come home without finding yourself in a viral video with someone stomping on you. It's my suggestion that such events be required to produce to the authorities a cogent and fulsome security plan to, as much as practicably possible, mitigate such outcomes before they are approved where possible. This will garner a far greater level of accountability from the organizers of these events. It is my prayer that God will continue to keep and bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Mr. Vice, I thank you. I don't know who next.
As many
Okay.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I stand in support of the court compendium before us. And to piggyback on what Senator Henfield would have alluded to, life, I'm sure, in the uniformed branches, as well in the court system, and, you know, victims, we talk about them all the time, and even ordinary citizens and residents who are exposed to the news and to these videos that go viral that you refer to. The mental health of these individuals is something very important. And so it's Mental Health Awareness Month, as it is Lupus Awareness Month. And I would encourage, especially the uniformed branches, to take time out as much as possible for self-care, to look out for themselves and to just get a break from what they have to face and deal with on a regular basis in terms of combating crime and illegal immigration and everything else that they face that the average person perhaps wouldn't have the stomach for. And so I encourage persons of the uniform branches to take time out and just enjoy life, care for themselves, and perhaps join the AG and some salts life, but just really kind of clear their heads and, you know, take care of themselves, you know? That's my encouragement to them. So I stand on the court compendium bills, the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022, the Magistrate Amendment Bill 2022, the Juries Amendment Bill 2022, and the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022. And as so ably discussed, you know, they seek to do various things. For example, the evidence bill will swap the live television link for a video link, which is in keeping with where we are in terms of advancement of technology. And of course, the pandemic has forced us to really, because I would say that technology is advanced already, but the pandemic has forced us to advance with it in recent times. And so we've been able to attend conferences and travel basically virtually and see friends and do certain things around the world from the comfort of our own homes. And so this bill seeks to leverage that technology to make the legal system more effective and efficient. And the juries bill, for example, in terms of publishing the list in a newspaper, now we'll just publish the link to the list in the newspaper, which is very helpful because I don't want everyone to know where I live. And that's what happens. You know, they publish the list as a long list, and not even just where you live, but Mr. Vice President, everyone now knows your middle name that you don't like. You know, I like my middle name, I'm just saying. But you know, people now know your middle name, your date of birth, and it's just everything about you. And it's not even, it's for like literally being on a jury. So perhaps they don't like the outcome of the case. I mean, what does that mean? They can literally come right up to your door. And so this amendment is very helpful indeed. And of course, time is in advance. So, you know, we used to wait on the story in the newspaper. So something happened and you wait the next day to read it. But now by the time the newspaper prints, oftentimes you already know the story. And that's the same way that we could use the technology and the internet to get the jurors list out. Because, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'll tell you, I spent an entire year around the court as a juror. And they seem to like me because I'm actually on the list again this year. And I did show up a few months ago for orientation. And somehow I managed to, and I didn't try to, but you know, I just presented my case as a senator, and somehow I think, at least for now, I'm excused. But you know, the jury's amendment is very timely because you don't want people's addresses in the newspaper, as is the Criminal Procedure Code. And so these bills seek to make some progress in what are really legacy challenges. And we've talked about it here today. These challenges extend across administrations, and they're really legacy challenges that, you know, we can present bills, but little by little, hopefully we'll really get to clear the backlog and address some of the other challenges that have come up today, because the reality is that we have a ways to go. When we would have once processed cases within a certain period, and now that period is extended to 211 days. That is a lot of days. And we have to remember when it comes to the court system, that persons are innocent until proven guilty. And so the reality is that some of the persons waiting 211 days, well, all of them we have to presume are innocent, but your life is on hold. Your life is on hold in terms of employment, in terms of family life, social life, and you could perhaps be completely innocent. And so it's really long, when you have that kind of protracted system, and everyone has the right to a fair trial and a speedy trial, and justice delayed is justice denied. I completely agree. And so, all the time spent on remand and everything else, anything we could do. So if we give evidence over, video link, all of this hopefully will help to make the system more efficient. And in terms of the challenge in sourcing jurors, I mean, maybe, without your address, people will be a little more comfortable, but I do agree that there is an inordinate amount of fear when it comes to being on a jury. And so the reality is, in being around the courts, I notice to show up each time every day, but like you say, it's delayed because they're trying to source a jury, or it's a break, try to get a jury. And I'll tell you, I don't know if it still happens, but persons who are employed in the Bay Street area and businesses in the Bay Street area tend to really suffer, because of the court system, because then they just go and grab random people in the middle of their work and say, come with me, come with me. And, they summons you to be on jury duty. And so these are the kind of challenges that I say are legacy challenges that extend across administration. And so we have to figure out what it is that we could do, because, you're waiting for your case to come up. It finally comes up. Either you don't have a jury sometimes, or the witness doesn't show up. Well, now I don't know what the excuse is going to be if you could possibly click a link, and so these are all things that'll help. And Mr. Vice President, court is nothing new, just as so many things aren't, because I'll be honest, there's a verse in scripture that says there's nothing new under the sun. And so a lot of things have happened before, but as we advance in terms of technology and as a civilization, right, we really should advance our systems as well. Recently, we celebrated Easter. And as an example, part of what might be missed in the Easter story is that there was a public trial. And I'll have to say that according to my recall in scripture, that public trial, I think, happened maybe within a 24-hour period. They went, they arrested Jesus. They got him in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think it was a Thursday. They brought him before the great Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court. And, of course, they're the ones who had jurisdiction over crimes that are punishable by death. And so, you had the jury there and the judges there. That's all the elders and the scribes and everyone else. And they gave him the benefit of the doubt, and they gave him a chance as the accused to prove his innocence. They did all of that. And so here it is now. You have a man over 2,000 years ago arrested by the Roman guards. I don't know whether they had a lawful warrant or not. That's a different story. But then he was cuffed. He was brought to the judgment hall of the high priest, and he had the witnesses testify against him on blasphemy. And, he was called to give a defense, and the jury voted unanimously to condemn him to death. And, as we have magistrate court and Supreme Court and Court of Appeal, of course, the Sanhedrin then had to take him to the higher court the next morning. The chief priests and stuff, they consulted with the elders and scribes, and they carried him away and they sent him to Pilate. And once he got to Pilate, Pontius Pilate is a good example of how judges ought to be. And that's looking and doing their duties fairly, looking solely at the law and at the evidence. And that's what he did. Pontius Pilate looked at the law, he looked at the evidence, he said, what grounds or what evidence you have to, convict this man of the charges brought before me against him. But if they could do that 2,000 plus years ago, within a 24-hour period, Mr. Vice President, surely 211 days in a day where we have the internet, where we have, vehicles, motorized vehicles. Back then, they had to take time to walk in sandals to get to the court. They couldn't even call no one by cell phone and all these other stuff. They had to send a message. So surely these bills that we are presenting here today, help us to take some steps toward advancing what 2,000 years ago seemed to be the practice and was still today before these particular bills. And so I'm proud to see that we are making strides. And I hope that the next time the Attorney General reports on these statistics, we could go, even if it's from 211 to 210 days, that would be some progress. We need to make progress as time goes by in terms of the administration of justice, Mr. Vice President. And the police, as he would have noted, they do their job and they do a hard job in terms of really trying to keep the peace. And the police don't want people to be in crime. So they do what they can in terms of prevention. And yesterday, ASP Leonardo Burrows spoke at the Rotary Club of Nassau. He spoke on youth violence. And he really talked about the police and the efforts that they're making in terms of working with young people to try to steer them away from acts of violence and in the right direction. And he called on community support to do the same thing. And yesterday, ASP Burrows, he spoke about the village, not as a place, but as a principle. And of course, Senator Hanfield has spoken to it a lot in terms of growing up on islands outside of New Providence and that village raising the child. And so we have to do what we can to steer our young people out of the court system. But of course, if they do end up in the court system, we have to make sure that justice is, speedy as possible, accurate and speedy. So like I said, we prefer to live when it comes to young people in a harmonious world where we don't even need courts, but that's just not a reality. Courts have existed since the beginning of time, as I just said, and they'll exist till the end of time. But we have to continue to do our best to make the court system more efficient and to improve the administration of justice, Mr. Vice President. And that 211 days isn't even just for the defendant. I mentioned in terms of, loss of income and all the inconveniences that come along with really having to wait for trial and wait for all of that. But what about the victim? What about really and truly going through a traumatic experience? And like we would have alluded to, you seeing the person in the food store on bail with an ankle bracelet on and a shorts? I mean, come on. Like, what does that do for me? Because now I'm at home in fear, closed up in my house, because I don't even want to go out. I have to relive this crime every day because he passing me or whoever in their Honda, tinted windows, ain't nobody checking. They have 211 days to be on the streets. So the point of the matter is that, we really have to make sure that we do what we can to advance justice, because here it is now for the victim. You may have gotten some counseling. You may have been, really tried to manage the trauma, try to move on, and try to start to live your life again. Go outside, develop some strength, and then the case comes up. And then you have to go and relive it all again and be a witness. I mean, thankfully now, you could hopefully do it through video link, so you don't have to be in the physical space with that accused person and have to live with the fears of that, so hopefully the video link, as mentioned for the children, and in other situations where the judges find it necessary to use it, hopefully that will allow the victims a little bit more, strength and courage in order to really deal with this whole situation. Because the inefficiency of the court system, even when it comes to crime itself, I believe, if we could be more efficient, that'll be a deterrent to crime. Because if you know that you're going to be, brought before the court quickly and, you're going to be punished, etc., then you're more likely to avoid crime. But if you know that you might end up on bail or, by the time you get to court, depending on, how long it's been and whether or not the witness shows and they find a jury, then you might get off, then you're more likely to say, hey, look, I might as well take my chances, And so we want to really get the court as efficient as possible. And even in terms of the jurors serving, and hopefully we can look at that as time goes by. We get a little stipend, I think, to juries. We give jurors a little stipend, but I don't even think it's enough to cover the parking of coming downtown, or I guess you could park by the post office and walk a couple miles to the court. But the point of the matter is that, it's an inconvenience, especially for salaried workers who are employed by companies. Perhaps you just get off of jury duty. But I have sat in court as a juror, and I watched, for example, a small businessman plead with a magistrate to say that, look, plead with the judge to say that, if I do not work, if I come here and do jury duty and I do not work, my family does not eat. But of course, the judge said, well, you have to do your civic duty. But understanding that person explained that situation, just serving alone would impact them financially, their clients, everybody else. And so these are some of the challenges when it comes to service of, jurors. But of course, it has to be done. But we could perhaps look at, the stipend and everything else, because these are some of the challenges. And so, Mr. Vice President, technology indeed has advanced over time. And like I said, the pandemic has forced us to advance with it. And so I'm happy to stand in support of these bills that seek to move us into 2022 and not AD. I mean, not BC, I'm sorry, because, times have changed and we have to change with it, and we have to leverage technology to advance all of the systems in our country, including the court system. Before I take my seat, I have a book by a Bahamian author called Whispers of a Country Boy, and it's by Hubert Bobo Omowale Edwards. Someone gave it to me. It's a collection of poems. And I'd just like to read for the mothers of our country a short poem he wrote called May Your Children. Mr. Vice President, Ilya. May your children make you proud. May they bring you great joy. May the moments you invest never be in vain. May the kindness you advance be returned perpetually. May your love be indelibly marked in their consciousness. And because of you, may they become greater human beings for the benefit of the world. May your light shine brightly forever through them and by them, may your joy extend through eternity. May you never want, never long for, and be forever cradled with the love of your children. May you forever be in their eyes the best mother there was, the best mother there is, and the best mother there will ever be. And may your children make you proud. Happy Mother's Day to the mothers of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pindo.
Thank you very much. I stand for the wrap up on this compendium of judicial bills. I want to thank all of my colleagues who contributed to this. I want to thank the opposition for their support on these important pieces of legislation for the advancement of the administration of justice. We had heard from a couple of the opposition senators, I think Senator Hempfield and Senator Ellis, speak to the concept of the independence of the judiciary and speak to the court services bill that have been around and is still around. I just like to update senators on the opposite side and the Bahamian people for their interest that the court services bill has been approved by this cabinet to be laid in Parliament and will be laid in the House of Assembly, that other place, at the next sitting on May 16th for first reading. So we are advancing the court services bill into Parliament to provide for that framework of independence. And, the former PLP administration had put in place the National Development Plan, the vision towards 2040. And in that National Development Plan, I think it's section 4.5 of that National Development Plan, we do speak to the independence of the judiciary and giving them the administrative framework and independence they need. So for those on the other side and for the Bahamian people, they can expect that legislation to be tabled in the House of Assembly at the next sitting. I think also it was Senator Henfield who raised questions about the physical plant of the judiciary, the courts, the courthouses, and all the related support of the court system from a physical plant point of view. I certainly would want to update the other side with respect to that matter. And as it pertains to some specialty courts that we had pledged to advance, we have identified space for a family court complex in which you would have a purpose-built or renovated family court, which would have the necessary social services offices and mediation offices for family matters and even support from law enforcement, to have a comprehensive approach to a family court system that would hopefully, will certainly have a better physical plant for these sensitive issues in the court, but hopefully as well advance the administration of justice in an area such as family matters that really deserves to have expedient service. We have also identified, although I think I alluded to it before, we're working on the logistics, a location to have the juvenile court of which, and Senator Hempfield correctly pointed out, many of our juveniles are violent offenders, and you need a special purpose-built juvenile framework with the appropriate accommodations and cells and structure. We've identified a location for that as well. There's somebody in that location, so we're working on clearing that out so we could get that accommodated for a juvenile court matter. I have also said in the public domain, and since I said it once, I'll say it twice, that before I demit my position as Attorney General, I would want to see a commitment, not only a commitment, but a start and possibly even almost a finish of a purpose-built central judicial complex. One that would, and I am lobbying hard. I am lobbying hard amongst my own colleagues. I would like to see that at the former post office location, backs right up on the police station. So you would have the law enforcement location there to help support that. Don't worry, clerks, I said I'm lobbying hard. And in that vein, we would want a purpose-built, all-encompassed court complex, judicial complex that would house all elements of the judicial system, including the Court of Appeal, the Magistrates Court, the Supreme Court, the Industrial Tribunal. We would even have areas for arbitration matters, so we have arbitration there. You would back up on Central Police Station, so you would actually have that ability to have the police support for that judicial complex. That's my lobby, and I am lobbying against other interests, but that is my lobby. I think is the perfect location for that. I think that Senator Hempfield spoke about providing the judges some support, and especially with judicial clerks and research assistants and young lawyers to help them clerk underneath them to help with the research and the formulation of opinions and judgments. We know that's a challenge. I may have been a little hard on the judiciary in my contribution, but they do need the support as well. And Cabinet has approved an extra allocation of, I think it's 9 judicial clerks for the judiciary as a whole to be able to provide that support for the courts and for the judges in order to be able to process court matters and judgments and opinions in a much more expeditious fashion with that support. Senator Hempfield, again, he's been on a really good wicket today, spoke about the youth of the country and what we need to do as a country to help steer our youth into away from violence and away from difficulties with conflict resolution. He used the word empathy, and I think that's the right word. We need to develop more care and empathy in our youth. And, there are a number of ways to do that, Mr. Vice President. And I think it's on each and every one of us of society to understand and figure out how we can be leaders to the youth and help develop a sense of empathy. Many around the table would know that my future wife is a leader and founder of an animal welfare charity. And we always talk about this. And I'll have a quote from St. Francis of Assisi that says, "If you have men who will exclude any of God's creatures from shelter of compassion and pity, you will have men who deal likewise with their fellow men. Studies have shown that children learn cruel and violent behavior from those around them, and that animal abuse often precedes violence towards other people." And these are studies that show that. And it is a culture of violence and abuse, and it could start with animals. In what we do, we advance animal welfare and kindness and believe with the education of the youth and how to treat animals, that helps with developing a sense of empathy. So as the children and the youth grow up, they're more empathetic to their fellow men and women and their brothers and their sisters, and they're less inclined to be violent offenders. So we embrace that in what we do for our social and cultural contribution back to society. And I think for all of those who can hear me speak right now, I think it's important for each and every one of us in our own domain, in our own area of interest, in our own area of lifting up society, to be able to help develop the youth of our country in an appreciation of empathy and kindness to others. And if we can all collectively give that little contribution back to the youth of our country, I think we will see the reciprocal benefit when it comes to violent offenders in our society. And just so you spoke on empathy, it's something that I am involved in my personal life, and I think it's something that each and every one of us should try to embrace to help develop the culture of the Bahamas into a culture that we remember, into a culture of the islands, into a culture where we want to all raise our children in. And so I just put that forward as my kind of contribution to what you identified as, I think, a real problem with the uplifting of our youth in the country. So with that, I wrap up the debate, Mr. Vice President, on the Compendium of Judicial Bills that was read for the second time as the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022. And I so wrap up and move.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act. As many are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed. For the second reading of bills,
Mr. Vice President, I move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act.
is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed. For the second reading of bills,
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as indicated at the beginning of the proceedings, there was an amendment to the Juries Amendment Bill 2022 in the House of Assembly. And so at this point, I would request that we withdraw the bill that is on our agenda and replace it with the bill that has come up from the House of Assembly, which I think you have, Mr. Vice President.
correct? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed as laid and passed in the House of Assembly. A bill for an act to amend the Juries Act. As many are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Juries Act.
For the second reading of bills,
There are none, Mr. Vice President.
okay. Committee of the Whole,
Mr. Vice President, I now move that the Senate do resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator James Roll Turner in the chair.
is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator James Roll Turner as the chair. As many are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator the Honorable James Roll Turner as chairman of the Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Bill, a bill for an act to give effect to the Paris Agreement to aid in a global response to the threat of climate change and to create and implement initiatives to offset carbon emissions, I move that the long title be agreed.
Is there a sec? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion is carried. As agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 30 of the bill be agreed.
It is moved and seconded that the clause 2 through 30 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 30 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the first schedule be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety. I'm sorry. It has been moved and agreed that the first schedule of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is agreed. First schedule.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the second schedule be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the second schedule be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The second schedule is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed and it's in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the Evidence Amendment Bill 2022, I move that the long title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the evidence amendment be agreed. Long title be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is agreed. The evidence amendment long title is agreed in its.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the evidence amendment short title be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The evidence amendment short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 to 5 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the clauses 2 through 5 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the schedule to the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the schedule to the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is agreed that the schedule to the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I now move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill 2022, I move that the long title, a bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act, the long title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill to amend the Criminal Procedure Code long title be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I now move that the short title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title to the Criminal Procedure Code be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is agreed.
Title. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 to 5 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the clauses 2 through 5 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to amend the Juries Act, I move that the long title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill to amend the Juries Long Title Act be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title to the bill to amend the Juries Act be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Vice President do now take the chair.
Second.
It has been moved that the Vice President do now take the chair. As many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is carried. The Vice President will now take the chair. Mr. Vice President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined several bills having made no amendments.
Honorable Senators, Senator the Honorable James Roll Turner, Chairman of the Committee of the Whole, has reported that the committee has examined a number of bills having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Before I move to third reading and passing, I would just like to thank Senator James Roll Turner for so ably filling in at short notice as Chairman of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to give effect to the Paris Agreement to aid in the global response to the threat of climate change and to create and implement initiatives to offset carbon emissions.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to give effect to the Paris Agreement to aid in the global response to the threat of climate change and to create and implement initiatives to offset carbon emissions.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act 2022. For the third reading of bills,
Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passage of a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act.
is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Evidence Amendment Act 2022. For the third reading of bills,
Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passage of a bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act.
is there a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Criminal Procedure Code Act.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Act 2022. For the third reading of bills,
Yes, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the Juries Act.
is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Juries Act.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Juries Amendment Act 2022. For the third reading of bills,
There are none, Mr. Vice President.
ordered that the clerk do take the bills passed by this Senate today to His Excellency the Governor General for his favorable consent. Consideration of House amendments, resolutions, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings.
Mr. Vice President, I would like to give notice that at the next sitting of the Senate, I would move the following resolution. Whereas the Accountant General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, hereinafter called the Accountant General, a corporation sole established and existing under and by virtue of Section 4.1 of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, the Statute Laws of the Bahamas, revised edition of 2000, hereinafter called the said Act, and continuing pursuant to Sections 210 and 131 of the Public Finance Management Act 2021, is seized in fee simple and trust for Her Majesty in right of a government of the said Commonwealth for public purposes of the hereditaments described in the schedule hereto, hereinafter called the said hereditaments. And whereas the minister responsible for housing is also a corporation sole established and existing under and by virtue of Section 3.1 of the Housing Act, Chapter 199, the Statute Laws of the Bahamas, revised edition of 2000. And whereas the Accountant General is desirous of transferring the said hereditaments to the minister responsible for housing at a national fee of $10 for the purposes of providing new dwelling houses for persons of moderate means, open spaces and parks and community and recreational areas. And whereas by Section 5.3a of the said Act, the Accountant General shall not sell or make any other disposition of the fee simple of any land vested in her without the prior approval of both Houses of Parliament signified by resolution thereof. Now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to Section 5.3a of the said Act, this House approves the conveyance by the Accountant General to the Minister responsible for housing of the said hereditaments for a nominal fee of $10 in the currency of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The schedule hereinbefore referred to, all that lot piece or parcel of land being two contiguous portions of parcel A and parcel B, the property of the Bahamas government containing by admeasurement 30 and 25/100 acres or thereabouts, situate on the southern side of Pinecrest Drive and approximately 800 feet eastwardly of East Street South in the southern district of the island of New Providence, one of the islands of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, which said lot, piece, or parcel of land is bounded eastwardly, partly by land now or formerly the property of Nassau Beach Properties Limited, being lot A2-1, and running thereon 100 feet, partly by Chester Bay Subdivision, and running thereon 318 and 21/100 feet, and partly by land the property of the Bahamas government, being the other portion of parcel A, and running thereon 599 and 79/100 feet or thereabouts, southwardly by land the property of the Bahamas government, being partly by other portion of parcel A, 1,174.64 feet, and partly by other portion of parcel B, 1,787.44 feet, and running thereon 2,962 and 8/100 feet or thereabouts, westwardly by land the property of the Bahamas government, being the other portion of parcel A, and running thereon 385 and 49/100 feet or thereabouts, northwardly, partly by Pinecrest Drive, and running thereon 2,165 and 1/10 feet or thereabouts, and partly by land now or formerly the property of Nassau Beach Properties Limited, being the lots A2-1 to A2-9, and running thereon 742 and 22/100 feet or thereabouts, which said lot, pieces, or parcel of land has such position, boundaries, shapes, marks, and dimensions as are shown on the diagram or plan attached hereto, and is thereon colored pink. So that entire description is on this, you can see it on this map. And all that piece and all that lot, piece, or parcel of land being a portion of parcel C, the property of the Bahamas government containing by admeasurement 5 and 19/100 acres or thereabouts, situate on the southern side of Monique Street and approximately 180 feet eastwardly of Pigeon Plum Avenue in the southern district of the island on the island of New Providence, one of the islands of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, which said lot, piece, or parcel of land is bounded eastwardly by the land, the property of the Bahamas government, being the other portion of parcel C, and running thereon 260 and 76 and 100 feet or thereabouts, southwardly by land, the property of the Bahamas government, being the other portion of parcel C, and running thereon 824 and 87/100 feet or thereabouts, westwardly by land now or formerly the property of Nassau Beach Properties Limited, and running thereon 276 and 5/100 feet or thereabouts, northwardly by a 30 feet wide road known as Monique Street, and running thereon 815 feet or thereabouts, which said lot, piece, or parcel of land has such position, boundaries, shape, marks, and dimensions as are shown on the diagram or plan attached hereto, and is thereon colored pink. So all of those descriptions evidenced by the maps, Mr. Vice President, and as I said, I intend to give notice that I would move this resolution at the next sitting of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator. Any further notices for future meetings?
Mr. Vice President, I would just like to renew all notices standing in the name of the government.
Orders for clerk? Adjournment?
Mr. Vice President, oh, no. Good. No.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Certainly, I just want to take this opportunity to wish all the mothers in the Bahamas a happy Mother's Day. This being this coming Sunday, my Senate colleagues in here who are also mothers, the wife of our Prime Minister, certainly all of our wives and everyone who are mothers, certainly my mother, Mrs. Karen Johnson, who is the wind beneath my wing, certainly, and then all the mothers in Bimini, Exuma, and everywhere else in the Bahamas. I wish you a happy Mother's Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, I want to just thank the Senator Roll, who has, I think, delivered Mother's Day greetings on behalf of all of us.
Yes.
And I move, Mr. Vice President, that the Senate at its rising do adjourn until Wednesday, 11th of May, 2022.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn until Wednesday, the 11th of May. As many are in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The Senate stands adjourned.